Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me tonight is Tarina Keene, who is the Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia. Thank you so much for being here, Tarina.
I am so happy to be here with you, Catherine.
I know, right? So full disclosure to our viewers, you are the Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia and have been for the last 10 years.
Yes.
But I sit on the PAC board. And you can explain that we have several different boards at NARAL, but I am on the PAC board, and that is our political arm of NARAL.
Yes, it is.
But give us some idea. Well, first of all, let me introduce you as a native Virginian. I'm a native Virginian, and we're both from Southern Virginia, where we have superpowers like we can spell Botetourt, and we know it's pronounced Buena Vista, right? So
yes.
Secret superpowers for people from the southern part of Virginia, Southwest Virginia. But you came to NARAL 10 years ago. It was very, very tiny. And you have grown the organization. But explain a little bit about our relationship to NARAL Pro-Choice America and sort of how we're organized and the kind of the work we're doing here in Virginia.
Absolutely. So NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia is the policy and political arm of the reproductive rights movement in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And what we do on a daily basis is, we work to make sure that those rights are a reality, that they are felt as a reality for most Virginians. And we do that through different ways. We do electoral work. We do policy work at the Capitol. We also do training and education. We're trying to do a lot of work around culture change as well. And this is, we're trying to make sure that all Virginians understand what their rights are and how there are some people who are actually trying to take those rights away or chip away access to actually being able to make decisions that are personal decisions that may be right for you and your family.
And I think too, we keep thinking about Roe v. Wade as like the seminal protection of our rights, but we don't often think about how states individually have chipped away at accessibility. So you might have the right, but we had under Bob McDonald a terrible situation where the legislature and the governor in that particular case tried to put up all kinds of barriers so that even though they didn't roll back that legal protection of Roe v. Wade, they could put all kinds of restrictions that would be tantamount to impeding women's ability to take advantage of this legal
Yes, absolutely. What we've seen here in Virginia over the last couple of decades is that chipping away, and particularly back in the 2010, 2011, you probably remember the rise of the Tea Party, and a lot of states, including Virginia, saw this wave of very conservative politicians swept into office. So in 2010, we had McDonnell and we had Bill Bolling as Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General as Ken Cuccinelli. And then, of course, the House and the Senate were solidly Republican-led, which tend to be the party that tends to be more anti-abortion, anti-choice. So at the time when in 2011 we had a situation where we call it TRAP, Targeted Regulations of Abortion Providers. This was a piece of, it was an amendment that was added on to a nursing home bill. This is just an example of how they chip away
at it.
So very end of the session, this bill had flown through both chambers, and as it was on its way out of the House, it was a Senate bill that had an amendment to actually treat abortion providers in the state as mini hospitals, making sure that the Board of Health would regulate them like they would regulate a hospital, was actually added on. And they were able to get that through, minus any committee debate on this particular issue. It flew through. It actually passed by one vote. And a lot of the bills that we've seen pass into law over the last 5 years have passed on by one vote. That's just one example, but probably the one that everyone remembers.
Yes, indeed.
It was back in 2012. We had the mandatory ultrasound bill that came up, and at the time, that was the year prior in 2011 when the Republicans took over the state Senate, which they had been hanging on to, or they were down, I think, 1 or 2 seats at that time. And when they came back to the General Assembly in 2012, they definitely had an agenda, what I would call an anti-woman, anti-abortion agenda. We weren't quite sure what would be their the big legislation that they would put forward, but they went with ultrasound. And the thing is that they had different bills for, I think, about 7 years prior that would require certain levels of mandatory ultrasound. But this one was a bit more special.
Yes, it was.
It's actually, when we were reading it, we realized that what they were requiring, they were requiring information from gestational age to circumference of the fetus's head, different types of, really, really
very detailed information.
Detailed, minute information, which you just couldn't find out unless you went inside the body. And that's when we determined that they were asking every woman who would who was deciding to undergo an abortion would have to meet this criteria and
it's invasive.
Yes,
I mean,
it's very invasive.
It's very invasive. I mean, it was a wand. Like, think of a lightsaber that's really an ultrasound,
right?
And it's very invasive.
Absolutely.
So I think Ralph Northam, our current governor, who's formerly
Yes.
lieutenant governor, who is a doctor, although he's not that kind of doctor.
Yes.
He's a pediatric neurologist. But even he knew that what they were writing into this bill was not benign.
Right.
It was invasive.
When we figured this out, I actually called down to his office, and I thought at the time he was the only doctor in the Senate. So I basically called ahead of time and I said, I need to come down. I need to speak with Senator Northam and talk about this ultrasound bill, because it was going to be in the Senate Education, Health and Education Committee right away, and he sat on that committee. And so I went to visit him, and I took a picture, a actual medical drawing of this, and I wish I had it with me to show you,
right?
Because it's compelling.
It is. I remember that Jon Stewart showed it on the Daily Show.
Yes.
I think Rachel Maddow showed it. I think a lot of late night comedians showed what it actually was.
Yes, but it was. He actually cracks this joke once in a while. He says he's a pediatric neurologist, as you know, is that he would say, Tarina, I'm a doctor from the neck up, not the down, the waist below. But he's a doctor, and he understood that actually interfering in the doctor-patient relationship was really an overreach in this case. And we have never actually mandated a diagnostic test in the Code of Virginia until that point. So it was a hard-fought fight. I think they really did think they were going to win from the beginning. They did ultimately actually get a mandatory ultrasound bill. It looked a lot different by the time it made its way through the General Assembly. But it came to them at a cost, at least to our opponents who really wanted to get this piece of legislation through, and it really made them. It made everybody so angry, and there was this organic uprising that came out of people understanding that they're trying to tell me what to do with my body. They're trying to mandate that even if a doctor said that this was not a necessary procedure, that I have to undergo this procedure, even if I don't want to. If I am to exercise my constitutionally protected right to an abortion, I have to jump through this hurdle. And what didn't get out a lot during that really hectic, crazy time was that it also mandated another 24-hour waiting
Right.
period, which actually, and the one thing that a lot of people don't know is that abortion providers were already doing ultrasounds
Right.
prior to an abortion, but mandating it gave the state more control, and adding that 24-hour waiting period was
Burdensome.
very burdensome
all of these
too.
things were designed to be burdensome. The trap regulations themselves, they required these clinics to have a certain number of parking spaces, to have hallways that were a certain width. That was what ended up being the demise of the state's largest clinic, which was in Fairfax City.
Yes.
The Fairfax City Clinic lost its lease, or their lease was up, and they tried to move, couldn't move because
They had to meet the regulations.
They had to meet the
So
regulation for
they-
things like parking spaces and the size of hallways. So it closed down and it's never reopened again. So, people need to understand that there are ways. You may think that Roe v. Wade is a protection, but it's not ultimately if women cannot actually access the services that law protects.
Absolutely. And if you have these, not everybody is opposed to regulations. Sometimes regulations are really good, but these were targeted. They didn't require any other medical provider to have to meet this very stringent standard. And it wasn't just the parking lots, it was actually revamping the inside of all of these doctor's offices, where let's remember that a first trimester abortion is one of the safest procedures that are performed not only in the Commonwealth of Virginia but around this country today. It has a less than 1.5% complication rate that would require a hospital visit. That is much lower than going in for a colonoscopy.
That's exactly the debate that happened on the Fairfax City Council.
Yes.
People who perform oral surgery, oh no, it doesn't apply to them. People who perform colonoscopy, oh, it doesn't apply to them. Who does it apply to? Well, apparently only clinics that provide abortion services. How amazing!
Right.
Right?
And it's a less than 5-minute procedure as well. So this is why we have to be very cognizant of how this chipping away is actually happening. Some things that say, oh, this really does make it safer, or abortion is already very safe. The one thing that it isn't is very accessible.
Yeah, and
yes.
as we've said before the show even started, one of the things about the women in Southwest Virginia, things like a 24-hour waiting period when you do not even have facilities means you're traveling outside of where you live. If you have other children, you have to do something about daycare so that you can wait that 24 hours.
Right.
So when we return from this break, one of the things that we're going to talk about further too is the fact that there's a mythology about who actually uses these services. And a lot of people have in their minds that it's teenage girls, because those are the stories in pro-Roe v. Wade in the 1970s. So please join us after this break. We'll be talking further with Tarina Keene.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
I got a creak in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. But I don't wanna get up. Very sad, no more love. All that I could do was remember you. You know I usually say no, but if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes. I mean,
Right?
like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you, you know?
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you?
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and joining me this evening is Tarina Keene, who is the Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia. Thanks so much for being here tonight.
Yes, I'm enjoying our conversation.
So when we went to break, we were talking about the sort of the mythology of who gets abortions and the fact that there seems to be, this idea that it's promiscuous teenage girls who don't have any better sense, or they're just loose women, and therefore that they've done it to themselves. I mean, I really do believe that conservatives think that that is who is getting abortions, and that people are using it as a form of birth control, which is another mythological thing that is often espoused. But the data shows that is not the case.
Absolutely not. And I always like to push back on that and say, well, that's a very expensive form of birth control.
Yeah.
It definitely is not. What we know in our most recent research over the past 3 to 4 years is that 6 in 10 women who have abortions already have a child. That means that, one, they know what it is like to be a parent, and they know the struggles that come with being a parent. I'm a parent, you're a parent.
I'm a parent, yep, sure enough.
And we have lots of resources, and not everybody does. Some women obviously do not have children, but it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter what led a woman to her decision. It is her personal decision to decide if, when, and how, and with whom to become a parent. It's one of the most important jobs that we will ever have.
And it lasts a lifetime, by the way.
And it lasts a lifetime.
I mean, a full-on lifetime. You never stop being a parent, and I found that out.
Yes, and your kids
My kids are way older, like
yes,
in their 30s, and it's
mine
like,
is
wow.
5, so.
Yeah, it's a big, huge commitment. It's a lifetime thing, and to
really
have the
is.
care of raising a child. But women who have means, women of means, and that includes the two of us.
Yes.
If we need something in healthcare, we can find it. We can find it. We have the resources to get it. A lot of times, what it comes down to is it's a poverty issue. It's an economic issue. There's pockets in communities where there's not adequate access to birth control or family planning. There's a lot of since we were kind of talking about. There's a national conversation about sexual harassment,
yes,
and sexual assault. Mm-hmm. There's also those reasons that people end up having to or wanting to terminate a pregnancy.
Right.
And
domestic abuse as well.
So who are we to judge why a woman would decide that? And we should not be judging. I mean,
absolutely,
the autonomy of women should be the autonomy of women. And I think that we're not looking at this as a tool of oppression, and I just call it that. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of things. Not having the right to vote was a tool of oppression. Not owning property was a tool of oppression. Women couldn't get credit on their own until the 1970s. All of these things are tools of oppression. And this, to me, is an enormous tool of oppression of women in this country. But that's not the conversation we're having, is it?
Well, it is not, but I think making sure, especially at this moment, is that we have access and we have our rights. One thing that I have seen through the years is that our opponents will stop at nothing to make sure that they are chipping away at limiting access, limiting those rights. Legislation is one thing. Policy is one way. Another way is co-opting the conversation and stigmatizing abortion, talking about it as if it is an unsafe procedure, and that is
absolutely
not the case. And we need to recognize that. We need to look at science and make sure that we are that we're having a logical, rational conversation and not one that has a different political end to it, a political goal to it. And that's what we're seeing a lot on the other side. Is this is very political and it's extremely ideological.
So with Roe v. Wade kind of being under assault right now, I mean, really very much under assault, we have to look to the states to see what they're doing to try to protect. Now, there are some states like Maryland that have put into their constitution a protection at the state level.
Yes.
So that is something, and I think maybe 3 states have done that. I know that Maryland's one, I'm not sure of the other ones, who've basically been proactive in saying, even if they were to say Roe v. Wade, we don't uphold that, the states have codified it. What about Virginia?
Virginia does, so there's a couple of ways that we can tackle this. There are some states that have a pre-Roe ban on abortion. Some states repealed those bans when Roe became the new law of the land. Some of them left them alone.
So they're on the books even though they're not enforced?
Exactly.
Oh my, that's terrible.
And then a few states had gone forward over the last few years, and they've put what we call trigger bans. So meaning the moment that Roe is overturned, that would automatically trigger an outright ban for abortion in that particular state. I believe there are 4 states that have those trigger bans, and or I think the total is 16 to 17. I'll have to double check on that number. That would outright ban abortion with either immediately or in short order if Roe was overturned.
So, but there is a possibility that we could add a constitutional amendment that would protect that right, regardless.
Right. Well, we are looking at our options here in Virginia because we don't have a trigger ban and we don't have a pre-Roe ban, which is good news for Virginia.
It is good news.
We're definitely on a political trajectory right now where we're hoping to have a pro-choice majority after next year's elections in 2019. That is definitely our goal. We're very close because in the House of Delegates there are 100 total House of Delegate members, but there are 49 pro-choice members. 100%, they get 100% voting record with us. And then on the Senate side, where we have 40 senators, there are 19 100% pro-choice senators in the state Senate. This is good news. Looking at I would call it outrage that is happening around the country right now, especially with women. We saw this with the Women's March a couple years ago when Trump came into office. That keeps going. But we are hoping that will lead us to a point where we can actually claim a pro-choice majority victory in 2019, which would be a historical feat for us to be able to accomplish. If we can actually do that, one of the ways, or one of the tools in our toolkit at the moment, our toolbox, is we're considering a constitutional amendment. That means essentially making sure that reproductive rights and access to abortion and all means of all reproductive health care options are enshrined in the Constitution. They are under constant attack at the state level and at the national level. So if we can actually put this in our Constitution, no matter what happens, should the worst case scenario happen at the federal level and we see an overturning or gutting of Roe, here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we can make sure that is enshrined as a right to every person in the Commonwealth.
Right, and we have a complicated sort of amendment procedure.
Yes, we do.
You know, and so it takes multiple years. It's not just that we would get in and we do it and they'd vote on it. And no, it's got to be a certain year. It's got to be an off year after an election. You have to put it on the ballot for Virginians to vote on.
Yes.
So it's not an easy or quick process.
It's not an easy or quick process. So the best case scenario that we can see for this actually being passed and put on the ballot would be in 2022. And what has to happen between now and then is actually winning a pro-choice majority in 2019. Coming back, we have a couple of other pieces of legislation, the Whole Women's Health Act that could roll back the TRAP law that I was mentioning, the ultrasound, the mandatory ultrasound, some of the more egregious pieces of actually statutes, not legislation, they're actually laws on the books to actually help alleviate some of the burden for women that they already have to undergo at the moment. But that would only be a temporary solution in our opinion. So in 2021, we could come back into the General Assembly session and introduce the constitutional amendment. It has to pass. That is also an election year, a big one for Virginia. It's for governor and lieutenant governor and attorney general, and it's a House of Delegates year. So let's say we actually have a great moment in 2019. We come back 2021. We put that in. We pass it. It has to pass again the next year, and we could actually get it on the ballot in November of 2022. That is the best case scenario. Again, a lot of things have to happen and go our way between now and then, but it is something that we definitely will be talking to Virginians about as a possibility. Unfortunately, we're actually seeing in West Virginia this year on the ballot is the exact opposite, is to actually put a ban in the Constitution in West Virginia. Actually, West Virginia has one of the more liberal abortion laws, even though they're only down to one actual clinic in the state.
That's what people don't understand. There are some states like Mississippi. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to close them down. So even if you could get an abortion in West Virginia or Mississippi, not unless you have money and you can go someplace far, far away from where you live to get it.
Right. You know, putting all of these laws on the books, they harm providers, but the thing is that they really harm women. These laws are not put in place to actually make it safer and more accessible to women. It's actually to shut off access. And when you shut off access to health care, nothing could be more dangerous for a woman who finds herself with an unplanned pregnancy. So that is something that we need to, be very aware. I mean, there are many people out there who would say, abortion is not right for me. It's not right for me or my family. But who am I to stand in someone else's way? And we know that 7 in 10 Virginians and 7 in 10 Americans, no matter where you poll, you will find that 70% of people in this country actually do not want to see Roe v. Wade overturned or abortion limited, the access limited for women.
That's absolutely right. So you would think that going into an election year, we've got midterms coming up as well.
Yes.
And we don't play, as NARAL, Pro-Choice Virginia, we don't play there.
No, we don't.
But we have to have people in the House to help legislatively support the rights that we already have. And so people, my little button says vote because your vote is your voice, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So when we come back, we have more to talk about with Tarina Keene because this is a very deep and complex subject. But our idea here is to give you the information that you need to have in order to understand what this issue is really all about. So please join us after the break. We'll be talking with Tarina Keene of NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia.
I surrender.
All right, pal. Get ready for the day, buddy.
Hey, Dad. Hey, Dad. Do we have a gun?
What's that?
Do we have a gun?
Maybe you can make retirement happen. After all, you made this vacation happen.
Double points with every purchase?
Cleverly merging promotions.
I love it.
Cross-referencing travel sites. And booking all your flights with those...
Vouchers. I got us bumped.
They were like, oh. But now they're like... Aloha. You aced this vacation. Now get the tips you need to get on track at aceyourretirement.org.
I tried Oxy at a couple of parties. I thought I had it under control. I didn't know it'd be this addictive. I didn't know how far I'd go to get more.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth.
What to expect when you're expecting.
Like here?
A teenager.
Today, I'm going to show you how to teen-proof your home. First step, hide the car keys.
preferably somewhere they would never look. Challenges will come up. Be ready for them. Hi, honey.
I'm ready for the... Mom, you don't use mannequins in the mannequin challenge.
You don't have to know it all to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we're talking with Tarina Keene, the Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia. Thank you for your time here tonight, Tarina.
We are definitely having a
I know.
wonderful conversation.
We could just keep going and going, but we're not going to overwhelm people. What we were talking about when we went on the break is the assault via legislation. The fact that there are states that have either pre-Roe bans or trigger, or you were telling me some have both, which is kind of crazy.
Right.
You know, so people obviously are interested in what is happening right now, not only with the midterm elections, but certainly with the Supreme Court. Because walk us through some possible scenarios.
So if we, well, obviously there's a huge conversation going on right now around the Supreme Court, and we have been very worried since Judge Kennedy, or Justice Kennedy, actually announced his retirement back in June. This was not something that we had expected, at least this year. We knew retirements were probably coming within the next 2 to 3 years. So this one maybe caught us slightly off guard, but it's so critical at this moment since we have a Gorsuch on the court as of last year.
And what I like to call the Merrick Garland seat.
Yes.
The Merrick Garland seat now occupied by Neil Gorsuch, because for 10 months that Senate committee, that Judiciary Committee, would not hear President Obama's nomination. People just, you know, forget that. So Neil Gorsuch took the Merrick Garland seat. Then
he did.
Justice Kennedy, who was considered a swing vote, decided he was going to retire.
Absolutely, and he's heard a couple cases around abortion in the past, but ultimately he had ruled to uphold Roe. And although Casey, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which was back in the early 90s, actually, that's where this idea, that particular case brought out the idea that, states can actually do what they think is in the best interest of a woman in terms of regulating or legislating abortion. And they really have run away with that in the past, I would say, 10 years. We've seen that in the state legislatures. We have always said that the fight is in the states because of that particular ruling, and that some states have actually liberalized their laws and some have really cracked down. Again, a couple years ago, we didn't really see ourselves in this situation where we would ever think that Roe would be overturned or gutted, but now we do. It's a real shocking reality that we're all waking up to, and that is why with the Brett Kavanaugh nomination, that looking at some of the things that he has ruled on has really had us up in arms. We know Gorsuch is also conservative and definitely an anti-abortion vote, but there wasn't a whole lot of evidence to that. We just know that Donald Trump, when he was running for president, actually promised, I'm going to put justices on the court that will overturn Roe and criminalize abortion and punish women. I mean, these were the words that came out of his mouth. So we believe him, and we believe that Neil Gorsuch and now Brett Kavanaugh are the two votes that will
give a majority, a conservative majority to that court.
Absolutely. Give it a conservative majority, and also they would not hesitate to overturn Roe.
Right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, but what it takes to do that, they can't just go and say, we're overturning. There has to be a case, right?
There has to be
a case. There has to be a case, and there's all these kind of cases waiting out in the wings. It's not like the cases are unknown to us.
No, there are several cases that have been making their way through the courts and the states over the last few years in an attempt to get to the Supreme Court. Even with Kennedy on the bench, there was no guarantee which way he would go. You've seen some of the what we call later term abortion cases, the 20-week bans, and we've also seen some of these fetal burial
laws.
Yeah. So some of those are tactics to get in front of the Supreme Court. And I would say if we do get another justice on the court as of today to replace Justice Kennedy, we're going to get someone who will definitely make that a priority, and those cases will come, they will jump all over themselves in these other states and our opponents to actually get those cases in front of the courts.
They will, and and the fact of the matter is that they fire up their base with this. As you said, Trump ran on this issue. In these midterm elections, we're seeing that people are running. They planted a hill. They planted a flag. They're going to die on this hill of repealing Roe v. Wade and doing everything to take this personal decision away from women. What's interesting is what happened in Ireland. So here we are. So here we are in this very Catholic country, right?
Yes.
Basically just passed a constitutional amendment making it not only legal for everybody, but fill in the blank.
Free.
Both legal and free. Ireland. There you go.
Right.
And that's, historically, people think of it as a Catholic country.
Absolutely. It is stunning, the 180 that happened in Ireland, and then to actually see where we are at this moment in time in our own conversation. And it's just stunning to me. I still feel like I have to pinch myself.
How did we end up here?
How did we get here? But knowing that we can do something about it, I don't think that this fight over the Supreme Court is over. I think there's still a chance that Brett Kavanaugh his nomination could go down in flames. There's a lot of reason for that, and we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, we will. But what I want to highlight is the fact that our organization had an issue with him before we ever knew who Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was. We had a problem with his rulings, his dissenting opinions, even I think emails that people, because he was like, oh no, it's settled law. Roe v. Wade is settled law. And then it's kind of like, oh, well, no, apparently he said over here it's not.
Right. He actually said that Roe was rotten precedent at one point. And so that tells us pretty much all we need to know, especially about his views on reproductive rights. We also know he has terrible rulings around immigration. He has terrible rulings around LGBTQ rights. I mean, this is and racial justice. I mean, this is an assault on what I would consider the American values of probably 70% of Americans. Absolutely, I would agree with you on that. Right? I mean, if polling is any indication, it's an assault on people who've already embraced the LGBT community and same-sex marriage and reproductive freedoms and, and immigrants and dreamers, and the DACA program. So we also know that polling is showing, even from the moment that he was nominated, was one of the least liked nominees to ever, to be nominated. And that actually, on my way over here tonight, there was a new poll that basically said that 48% of Americans believe that he should not be confirmed, and only 42% said that he should. So that puts him way below even Clarence Thomas. I know, right? And that's a pretty low bar, if you ask me. So they aren't listening to the public on this particular nominee. But if you have an agenda, and there are some real diehards out there when it comes to rolling back rights, and which is just stunning to me that we should be adding rights to our Constitution and not and to the laws of the land, not rolling them back. But there are some that want to see a lot of these personal freedoms dissolved. And they probably will see that happen in short order if we get a Brett Kavanaugh on the court. Think about the ERA.
I mean, that's another one. It's kind of like women are not mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. You want to pass the ERA, just basically saying women have equal rights. And we aren't even able to do that.
Right.
What does that say about us as a country? It's like, no, you don't need that. You don't need that, and you don't need this. And we're tired of government overreach, says the Republicans, unless we're reaching into private places with our ultrasound wand. That's not government overreach.
Yes.
Like, I think it is. I think it is. And so I have to ask myself, am I the only one who sees it? Are we the only ones who see it? Surely we cannot be the only Americans who see the contradictory nature of all of this.
Right. I don't think that we are. I think it's pretty stunning to me that we are seeing this particular conversation where it is at the moment, where you have a woman come forward, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, and other women. She's not the only one, but certainly she was so brave to go before the American people and tell her story, something that she really didn't tell, especially in this detail, to very many people through her life over the last, I think it was 36 years. And I think that anybody who has been through a sexual assault, whether you have personally or you know of someone, this is a very, very personal issue, and it's very hard to talk about. It's even sometimes hard to recognize or to deal with in terms of recognizing that this actually happened to you. And so somebody coming forward decades later is not uncommon at all.
Well, you know how we just saw Bill Cosby perp walked into prison. And I think the total there is like 60 women going back to 1969.
Right.
So clearly women didn't come forward. Right. You know, they wouldn't be believed. He was America's dad. Look at Harvey Weinstein. Look at Les Moonves.
Right.
You know, and until women started feeling safe to tell their stories, they didn't even realize how many other women had been trapped the same way because all the women had been silent.
Mm-hmm. And yet we're giving someone like Brett Kavanaugh the benefit of the doubt, even though he came in on Thursday. I mean, he was basically a raging lunatic, and it was stunning to see someone lose control like he did. That is not the temperament that we want of our jurists. It is stunning that he would get a pass for behaving this way, and that we would actually give him the benefit of the doubt after you have another, multiple women now coming forward and saying that they're not credible, or even to me, which is harder to swallow, is to look at these women, actually say they are credible, but that you just don't care, and that this person still deserves to be on the court of the highest land.
I know, right? And we're going to go to a break, but let's talk a little bit about the two women who put their hand in the elevator door and had a conversation with Jeff Flake, and maybe perhaps change the course of history by doing so. So please join us after this break. We are talking with Tarina Keene of NARAL, Lake Virginia.
This is the story of a boy who was very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where nothing could get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. It made him feel uncomfortable. One day, he found out he had something called autism. His family got him help, and slowly, he learned how to live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
What do you think you're doing, Kevin?
Was just gonna drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
Like hearing voices?
Like your text-to-emoji ratio?
Oh man, the selfies. Selfie, nailed it.
We all have warning signs that let us know that we're probably not okay to drive. Mine is pretending to be your subconscious.
Craig, come on man, let's put a ride home.
Being a dad is an adventure full of special moments.
A cruise?
Surprise! Unexpected moments.
I got this.
And even awkward moments.
Okay, Dad, thank you.
But every moment you spend with your kids, even the smallest moments, can make the biggest impact on your child's life. So take a moment to be a dad today.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello? That's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Tonight we are talking with Tarina Keene, who is the Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia. So Tarina, we've had a caller, and this caller wanted to know, when we went to break, we had said something about the women in the elevator, and this caller wanted to know if you think that those two women really had an impact on how Jeff Flake voted.
Absolutely. He may not want to admit it, but this shows the sheer power of organizing and personal stories. This is what we do at NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia, and a lot of our coalition partners. We count on people to tell those stories because that's what makes a difference. It actually humanizes people and the situation that you may be advocating for or against. So I think those women, I don't know about you, but I was brought to tears listening and watching that video. I was brought to tears listening and watching Dr. Blasey Ford tell her story. These are powerful stories. And I cannot believe that we have people in power who seem to be unfazed, unmoved, that they are so motivated to actually put somebody who is unfit to sit on the bench and has proven that multiple times just by not telling the truth or the whole truth about a certain situation. But now with these allegations of sexual assault, I think that it's pretty stunning that we're still here, even though there is an investigation, right? But I do believe in the power of personal stories.
But it's not over yet. And so, Lindsey Graham lost his mind. He just was all over the place. Brett Kavanaugh, Judge Kavanaugh, he cried, he shouted, the way he spoke to Amy Klobuchar, and how about you? And if you ever black, I'm like, oh my goodness, that is just not acceptable in any circumstance, but certainly not in this setting. He got a pass on that.
Yes.
Everybody gets a pass on this, and because they're trying to ramrod it through.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, once this is over, the next hurdle is the Senate has to vote. And there are members of the Senate, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin's running for re-election in West Virginia. You've already said how conservative and what's on their ballot this year.
Right.
So what are these senators going to do? Because it will change the course of history.
It will definitely change the course of history. I don't know what the senators are going to do. I'm hoping that they will step up and do the right thing. Again, this man has proven himself to be unfit. I think he should be fired from his current job as well, and taken off, sitting in the D.C. court. But what we can do and what we know works is the power of telling personal stories and the power of activism, showing up and letting the people in power know that we are there and that we are watching them. We can also show up in November, and every November. I think that this is a moment that we're living in that it's still a little shocking sometimes. But since the election in 2016, we have seen unprecedented numbers of women and men who have stepped up and stepped out and put themselves out there. They've never been activists before. They've never been to a march. They've never been to a rally. They may have never even talked to a legislator before. But now they are out there and they are advocating not only for themselves, but they're advocating for every other person coming in behind them. And that's what we are doing. I know, as I mentioned before, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I just can't fathom her growing up in a world where she has less rights than I did when I was born and I was coming up. And that's a real reality. I mean, if we see an overturning of Roe, I mean, what we're telling is this new justice, whoever that is that gets on the court, they will have the power to control millions of women's lives. That is something that is hard to swallow and digest. But what will that look like? Could it be done for the good, or is it for a political agenda? And I'm hoping that I'm definitely rooting for senators to vote against Brett Kavanaugh. But whoever does come next, and who would be the new nominee, we still have to hold them to a higher standard. And the highest standard. Every jurist should be held to the higher standard, and that is not what is happening right now with this nomination.
It's political. I mean, we've been moving toward activist judges for a long time, but now it's just blatant. It's not like you even have to hide it. One of the things that I found very ironic, because my brain just works like this, is the fact that Dr. Christine Blasey Ford has 2 sons, and Brett Kavanaugh, Judge Kavanaugh, has 2 daughters.
Yes.
And that's kind of ironic if you think about it. So, I'm sure Judge Kavanaugh wants his daughters to grow up in an environment that is safe for them, so that they don't end up in high school in the situation that Dr. Christine Blasey Ford ended up in. But if he's counting on the mothers of America to raise their sons not to be predators, I can tell you, so far that hasn't worked real well, because no mother in America raises her son to be a sexual predator. So we have to look at the environment that creates behavior that is acceptable, or goes unpunished, or gets hidden, or women are silenced because no one believes them.
Right.
I hope he's doing more than just praying for his daughters' futures. That something needs to change.
I could not agree with you more. And this is a moment for us as Americans, as Virginians. I want to give a little plug in for Senators Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, who both have come out and said that they will. What we're saying, row your vote.
Oh yes, row your vote. That's such a great hashtag.
We kept asking them initially after Kavanaugh was nominated. We wanted to make sure that we could get senators around the country to come out. And of course, we focused in on our 2 senators here in Virginia. And they did. They came out just a few weeks ago and said that they would not be supporting Brett Kavanaugh. And I have to say, they did it before these sexual assault allegations really came to full light.
And to your point, that's organizing. It's because you, NARAL and Planned Parenthood and other organizations organized women to make phone calls, emails, show up, tell their stories to both of our senators to help them understand how this directly impacts the women here in Virginia and why it is so important to us that this not happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. So part of the Row Your Vote campaign is something that NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia came up with. It's just a campaign. We used it on the senators, but we're also applying it to this year's elections. So we have, here in Virginia, we could actually make history this year. We have, I think it's
so many women candidates, yes.
Which is historic.
Yep.
And, they all have a really good chance of actually winning these races. And we could actually send, multiple women to represent us here in Virginia. And that is incredibly exciting and powerful. And it shows you, again, we're in a moment. We need more women in elected office. I know you know this very intimately and work for this.
Yes, I do work for this all the time.
But we need them at every level. We need them in Congress. We need them in the General Assembly. We need them at the local level. We need them on school boards as much as we need them on city and town councils.
Yep.
And so the thing is that the more that women are in these positions of power, the less often, hopefully, we will see the power structure work against us. And that's what's happening right now. We don't see, we see a lot of white men who have been in power for a very long time.
And at every level.
Right.
I mean,
showing rage and fury, right?
Right, but when you say that, and I reference the patriarchy all the time, and patriarchy is not individual men. It's an institutional structure. It's part of our culture. But men run our legislatures. They run the boardrooms. They run corporations. They run communities of faith. everywhere you look, it seems like men have the power to make the decisions. And in some cases, they have used that to perpetuate the patriarchy.
Yes.
And so women have got to understand no one's coming to rescue us except us.
It's true. We do have some allies on the.
We do. But again, and like I said, individual men, it's not the individual men. We do have wonderful allies. And Tim Kaine and Mark Warner are two of the best allies. My own husband's a feminist.
Yes.
So is yours.
So is mine. Absolutely.
But when I think about the women who are running, and I want to give a shout out to Jennifer Wexton in the 10th. We have Vanjie Williams, Elaine Luria, Leslie Cockburn, Jennifer Lewis. Yes. I mean, there are women who have stepped up to run, and they are amazing candidates.
They are. Really exciting. They could go a long way in helping to change the culture and the power structure that we see, in the highest levels of our country, and we need more of them at the table. I don't know if you heard this. It's slightly off topic, but. I think it was today that the governor of California actually signed a bill into law basically requiring that at minimum one woman sit on corporate boards in the state of California. But depending on the size of the corporation, I think there's some sort of a metric there.
Right.
But it could be,
it has to be.
It should be multiple women.
It has to be intentional.
It has to be intentional.
It's not just going to happen. There's plenty of qualified women. There's plenty of qualified men. If you don't, if you're not intentional, it's not going to happen organically.
Yes.
Right.
But hopefully, this will be the first step in the right direction to help push the greater good along.
And speaking of men, I don't want to end without saying that there's a Men for Choice event on October 17th at Port City in Alexandria.
Yes.
So men who want to come out and support the women they love and reproductive rights, they can find information on the website.
Yes, they can. And, we're asking, we know that there are many men out there that stand in solidarity with us and sit on our boards and help us with the activism. I mean, women's issues are everyone's issues.
That's true.
So I try to make sure that everyone realizes that. But it's always good to have people who tend to have maybe a little easier time.
Right, their voices are heard. They are in the places where decisions are made. They're at the table where decisions are made.
Absolutely, and we also have an ally in our governor and our lieutenant governor, our attorney general, and I think I mentioned a lot of the electeds who are in the General Assembly right now.
We are indeed fortunate. So thank you for reminding me that Virginia has a lot to be thankful for. I am very thankful, and I'm thankful that you are here tonight to help me explain to our viewers why we should all be behind protecting reproductive choice here in Virginia.
Yes,
so thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.